Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we are talking about yet another Minnesota Vikings loss. Unfortunately, but this game was a little bit more fun to watch, I think. And I think most of you would agree with me. Your Vikings ultimately went down 31-30 at the hands of the Tennessee Titans at US Bank Stadium yesterday. So we'll go through this. Like I said, it was definitely a really fun game to enjoy. I think there's a lot of bright spots for sure. With that being said, an 0-3 start is still an 0-3 start, and we have to keep that in mind when we're kind of breaking down what this team is and what kind of future that they have, both in the near future and the long-term future as well. So we'll do our typical thing, breaking down each the key players of the game, and we'll come to some conclusions here and kind of see where the Vikings are going from here. So all right, let's get it started then. We always start with the quarterback, so let's do just that with Kirk Cousins, who had, I'm going to call it an uneven performance, because there were definitely some highlight moments for Kirk, and there were definitely some moments where I was really, really, really frustrated. Not just as a fan, but as someone who thinks he knows stuff about football. I felt like Cousins just wasn't doing very, standard things. Not making the. I'm just going to get right to the point. I think his pocket presence is trash, and I've had just about enough of it, and I'm sure we'll get more into that. But Drew, 16 for 27 for Cousins, 251 yards through the air. That's a 9.3 average. The touchdown to interception ratio of 3.2 isn't awesome. He only took 2 sacks despite the offensive line, which also was not awesome. And he gets a quarterback rating of 96.4. So that sounds great on paper. I mean, was he as am I wrong to suggest that Kirk Cousins did not, fulfill, I suppose, the expectations of an $84 million contract with this performance against Tennessee?
So the issue with Kirk Cousins is that, and I think I've fallen victim to this, and I believe you have as well, and I think a lot of the Vikings followers, fans have, is this idea that Kirk is going to save the day, when the defense doesn't show up, or this idea that Kirk can be that, save the, kind of carry the team when nothing else is going well, right? And that's, understandable, because you pay a quarterback that much money. That's kind of what you want the quarterback to do. But when you look back at when the Vikings signed this guy, he was basically there to sort of be that last piece, be the complement to the rest of the roster. And so the expectation should never have been for Kirk to carry the team, because he's never really done that in his career. He's put up big numbers, put up big stats, but he's needed things around him to do that. Whatever you want to think about Washington, prior to Kirk moving to Minnesota, he did have some weapons out there to work with. The offensive line was not horrible by any means either. So it's not like the supporting cast there, it's not bad. At least it wasn't, in my opinion. And so he comes here, and this, I think, is the worst situation that he has been in his career. And so for
it's
us
the worst
to
situation
him,
I've been in my career as well, by the way.
Well, yeah, good point.
Sorry, keep going.
So for us to expect him to rise to the occasion when the odds are stacked against him, that's never been who he is. And so I think it's naive of us to really think, oh, well, Kirk did this last year in October for 4 or 5, 6 games when he had Dalvin Cook running at the best rate in the NFL. He had Stephon Diggs getting open better than anybody deep down the field. So for him to just, he'll pick up right where he left off in that with that stretch of performance and do it again here, just not a fair expectation. And so I think the pocket presence issues that you brought up are certainly true, but I think he was pressured at the third highest rate of his career yesterday in terms of a single game. Right. So that doesn't help him at all. Right. And of course, the defense giving up big play after big play to set up scores that really, it helped us that Tennessee, when they got into Vikings territory, didn't do a whole lot offensively, because it could have been a lot worse the other way around. So Kirk, it's
give me a grade. What it is. Give me a grade for Kirk.
It's a B-. I mean, I think what we're going to see is that's about a typical game. Maybe I give him some credit for a couple of those big plays, like the Thielen touchdown was really nice. And then, finding Justin Jefferson, targeting him a lot more. I'm going to give him credit for that just because I think that needs to happen. Anyway, when you got a young receiver, you want to see what he has in store. But this is, like you said, very uneven, a lot of good, a lot of bad. That's what we're going to be in for the rest of the season.
So I will fully admit that I think, I admitted last episode that I hopped off the Cousins train, right? That holds true this week as well. And so I'm willing to fully admit that part of my opinion of Kirk is probably a little bit harsher than it was even just 10 days ago. It's just different now. I mean, I saw the floor, and now I'm having trouble seeing the ceiling, and that's just it's hard to not be disappointed when you see guys like, Joe Burrow, for example. He's playing in his third game. I mean, I'm not saying Philadelphia is good, but Cincinnati's not good either. And Joe Burrow consistently found a way to make drives happen, with the exception of overtime yesterday. It's just very, very frustrating.
That first game of the year, he played a tough Chargers defense. They should have had a field goal that would have sent down into overtime. Like he's making the plays and making things out of nothing when he needs to, which is something Kirk has never really done.
Right. So my point being then is, and you could pick any quarterback you want. Like if you want to pick Mahomes, Jackson, hell, Roethlisberger. I mean, I don't care who you want to pick. It's just very frustrating to see that the Vikings quarterback, and this has never been the case with the exception of the 1 year of Brett Favre, the Vikings quarterback has never been a guy who can get it done in crunch time. I mean, yes, we have small, teensy sample sizes of this occurring. I mean, I'm sure Tavares Jackson had a couple of nice drives, right? And I'm sure that, Case Keenum, of course, has the Minneapolis Miracle, and like there's some major highlights and some cool moments for sure. I'm not dismissing all of it.
None of it is sustainable.
Right. And that's really my point here, is that it's not sustainable, and that Kirk Cousins proved to me yesterday once again why it's not sustainable. And so it's not just his fault, but he's the face of the franchise, right? I'm going to fault him no matter what. The Vikings lost. I'm going to fault him. It's going to happen. I don't care if you love Kirk. I don't care if you hate Kirk. I mean, you have to delegate fault here in some capacity, despite the fact that the offense put up 460-ish yards. There's still some fault to be had. And yes, Garrett Bradbury, that snap, atrocious. You got to know the snap count. I'm pissed about that too. But you know what? Like, Kirk Cousins is in charge of that offensive line. Like, he's got to get everyone on the same page going up to the line of scrimmage. So yes, Bradbury should have known the count, but also Kirk Cousins, like, do a better job. Like, no one's even yelling. Like, do a better job of making sure that your guys know exactly what's going on. This is critical moments. This is season defining at this point. We're in week 3. The Vikings are 0-2 at this point. This is a season defining moment, and you have to go 35 yards in 2 minutes. You don't go 1. In fact, you go backwards 17. That's unacceptable. I don't care who you are as a quarterback. I'd say the same shit about Tom Brady if he did the same thing. It's not acceptable. And you know what? It's a product of a lot of different things. Like, yes, I'm sure the offensive line is in Kirk Cousins' head. Hunter Dozier sucks. Drew Samia is not a professional football player. It sucks to have those two guys, basically sandwiching Garrett Bradbury, who has been much better this year for what it's worth. But you've got 3 guys who I don't really trust, and then you got the 2 bookends who, again, for what it's worth, I think O'Neal and Reeve played fantastic yesterday, and for the most part have been fantastic this entire year. So really this comes about the interior, right? So I will give Kirk Cousins some leniency for the fact that he doesn't have all pros standing in front of him, but you got to know that too. You got to know, like, you got to sense your surroundings. You got to adapt to what's around you. You got to deal with what you got. And he didn't do that yesterday, and that fires me up as a fan because I've seen Ryan Tannehill do it. If Tannehill can do it, so can Kirk Cousins. That's where I'm at.
Well, see, Kirk has never he's never had the tendency to move around, right? He stands there in the pocket, he lets the reads develop, right? And he, after a couple of them, I mean, at that point, he just goes to the reads, and if the sack happens, the sack happens. Like, that's the problem, and that's what you see so many other quarterbacks do, and why they're so successful is they are able to, when they will feel things break down and get out of there, right? And Kirk has, like you said, there are just very small glimpses of these things happening, whether it's the clutch drive when in crunch time, whether it's something like this where he once in a while will sneak out of the pocket and make a throw like the Thielen play for a touchdown. But it's not sustainable enough, doesn't happen consistently enough that it carries over into, sustained success. And so that's where, with with Kirk in the crunch time situation that you were referring to, that last drive where the Vikings had to go how many yards to get a field goal. Everything that could have fallen apart basically did. And so the one thing I didn't like too, now this is probably me taking something out of proportion here, but when Kirk was asked about it by the media, because I think so what happened was Zimmer said something about like this was a disaster or something like that, the final drive.
Right.
And Kirk said something like, you'll have to ask coach what exactly he's referring to. And it's like, there's nothing specific that needs to be referred to. It was all a disaster.
He doesn't get it. Right. He just
take
doesn't
some blame as the face of the franchise. Take some of that, and you'll be much more respected as the leader within the locker room. I know for sure you will be among the fan base. And I'm not supposed to be able to relate to Kirk Cousins right now as an NFL professional quarterback making millions of dollars, but that's just the way I see things from my vantage point. And it's tough to anybody, right? Like that's one of the things that my key, I don't know if you want to get into a personal level here, but like a key value of somebody, and I'm judging them as a person, like if I, like them or don't like them, is if they can accept and be aware of their faults, right? And take responsibility for them. And it's really tough to root for somebody that doesn't do that. And I think Kirk has done all that most of the time in Minnesota, but in this instance, like, come on, you're the leader of the offense. Everything that could have collapsed did on that last drive. You got to take some responsibility for that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's just another thing. I mean, I'll sign off on the Kirk Cousins segment of this podcast by just saying that I'm having a very difficult time, like, not just, like, I'm having a difficult time liking Kirk on a personal level right now. Like, it's not just a professional for me. I just don't like him as the face of the franchise. I don't like him as the quarterback anymore. And again, maybe honestly, I could be being dramatic. I'm very, very frustrated at a 0-3 start. And I think I've done a pretty good job throughout my sports entertainment hobby career type deal of being objective and not allowing my emotions to get the best of me. But this is like, and if I'm being honest with you, I don't think I am right now either. I just think Kirk is a very difficult person to root for. And I think that he's a very difficult, like, quarterback to get behind, especially when he says stuff like you just referenced. And he does games like this where it's like you do so many things well, Kirk. You do so many, like that throw to Jefferson, the 71-yard touchdown. It couldn't have been much better. And of course, Jefferson made it happen after that. But like, or the throw to Thielen, or the perfect spot that he threw to Rudolph in the end zone for that one-handed amazing catch. Like, those are all such great moments. Like, just close the door, dude. Like, I don't understand, like, why this guy just never he gets the yips when it really, really matters. Like, when the moment comes, when the spotlight is on Kirk Cousins, he shrivels. And it sort of hurts my feelings. Like, I can't stand I can't stand watching it, and I'm very, very much in the tank right now with the Vikings. I'm so much for moving on from Kirk, and we discussed the issues with that last episode, so feel free to go back and listen to that. But I'm just
That's
done.
The problem. They really can't. They really can't move on from him for a couple more years.
Right.
So
I'm just I'm exhausted. That's the best way to put it with Kirk Cousins. I'm exhausted, and I think. Yeah.
The one thing that I can hang on to is I think most of us felt very similar to this after week 4 last year, after that Chicago game.
Right.
There was a lot of this similar feeling out there about Kirk. And I know this is a very different year. Stephon Diggs is not in Minnesota anymore. I think moving parts happening, new offensive coordinator, whatever the case is. The Vikings had wins at this point on their resume last year, but there was a growing sentiment, okay, when is Kirk going to be done? Like, this was before he had been extended. There was teammates calling him out, all this stuff after that Bears game, and the Kirkometer in Minnesota, if you want to call it that, was very low, and it's very close to that point, if not lower right now. So maybe Kirk will find something. I remember that last year, I think it was the Eagles game right after that, where he really played with a chip on his shoulder and made every single pass. And Zach Brown, I believe, called him out before the game for the Eagles, and then got cut. So something like that. Maybe that's something that Kirk can turn into a win in the coming weeks here. But man, it's not looking great right now because so many Vikings played well yesterday, and
let's talk about that.
That should be a loss.
Let's do that. Let's lighten the mood a little bit here and talk about the fact that the Vikings, and I know probably the vast majority of our audience plays fantasy football, you got the number one scorer at running back and the number one scorer at wide receiver yesterday, and that was a product of multiple just like I can't even explain to you how tremendous some of the plays that Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson made yesterday.
Yeah.
Like they were the type of plays that were about the individual, right? Like it wasn't just a team effort. Like it wasn't just the blocking up front. It wasn't just a linebacker missing a tackle. It was Dalvin Cook putting his foot in the turf, or yeah, turf, whatever, and getting around guys and making things happen that only Dalvin Cook can do, right? And he's playing opposite Derrick Henry, who, you know, had a pretty solid game as well, right? Ultimately had the two finishing blows. So I mean, it just like you love to see that. And the biggest like the biggest point of emphasis here that I think is the most important thing about Dalvin Cook's day is that it started out in the worst possible way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dalvin Cook fumbled on it was the opening drive or the second drive, right?
Something
He
like that.
could have if that was Kirk Cousins, he would have let the shit run down his leg, because that's what Kirk Cousins does. Dalvin Cook, on the other hand, got back out there, and yeah, do any of us like Mike Zimmer? Like, I don't even know why he had to say, well, I didn't like that he fumbled. Well, yeah,
Didn't
you
like
know
that.
what?
I did not like that.
Stupid comment. The dude averaged 8.2 yards per carry after that fumble. Okay, you know, like I don't. Dalvin Cook did everything and anything that you can ask out of a running back, especially one that's being compensated as heavily as he is, and he did it at an extraordinary level. It was so entertaining to watch. There is like that was as good of a running back performance as the Vikings franchise has seen since Adrian Peterson. I think that's fair, that it's right up there with some of Peterson's best. I mean, obviously you can think of the 296 or some of the moments from the 2012 season, but this Dalvin Cook game, 22 carries, 181 yards and a touchdown with that long score for 39 yards out. This is what you're going to get. This is the best you can do at that position. I don't like if you're someone who believes that the running back position complements the quarterback position, Kirk Cousins is never going to get more help than he just got from Dalvin Cook. And that's probably the most frustrating part, is that ultimately you lose despite the fact that yesterday your running back was probably the best in the entire NFL.
Yeah, that was it was unreal. Like, it was one of those where you don't realize how many yards he's actually accumulating, because he, like, you know, when Peterson back in the day, he would put up those 150, 200-yard games by getting two runs of like 70 plus, right? And then the rest of the game would be like 2, 3, 0, 2, like those type of games. Dalvin is not like that. He had a 35, 39-yard touchdown. Everything else was chunks of 10, 15, 20. Like, the success rate is extremely high. And that's something that is a huge, you know, it sucks that the running game is being emphasized so much less in the NFL today, because the Vikings are set with that zone running scheme. Like, that's a positive out of all this, you know,
right.
Even in the first 2 weeks when it just hurt, you know, the Vikings could not run the ball because of the game situation, but the running game looks terrific right now. That outside zone stuff, these offensive linemen, is for what they might lack in pass protection. A few of them that are athletic enough to get out, move around, and work in the running game. So that's working really well. That's fun to see. And Dalvin is electric, man. Get the ball in his hands. He'll make people miss. I'm still in awe of his speed to get around to the corner. It's like, I know his 40 time wasn't necessarily awesome coming out in college, but there's something that it's a different speed when he's turning the corner versus guys that are trying to chase him down, and the angles they take are always wrong. So that's fun to watch.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the other bright spot then. I think we covered Dalvin Cook pretty well there. I mean, straight up just a fantastic, like an A++ performance for Dalvin Cook. The only thing is that fumble, and I had forgotten about it by the end of the day because of what he did after it. So the other bright spot, of course, Justin Jefferson, right? 7 receptions, 175 yards, 1 touchdown in his breakout campaign, right? This is game 3 for Jefferson. He basically was not involved at all in the game plan the first 2 weeks, which honestly draws a lot of comparisons to the situation that Stephon Diggs had when he became relevant,
that's
right? You know, he was completely irrelevant until that Denver game, and then he put Aqib Talib on skates, and all of a sudden, the rest is history, right? So that in itself, you know, the fact that my mind can go there, And the fact that Justin Jefferson is replacing Stephon Diggs, I know he's not Stephon Diggs. I'm not trying to be that guy, but he is replacing his role. And to see him do this at such a high level so early in his career, he was getting off of press. His release was tremendous. His routes were fantastic. He was wide ass open the entire day. The entire day, right? The first 7 balls that got thrown to him were completed. And of course, late in the fourth quarter when he got 2 more shots, both of them were incomplete. But I think that was someone else's fault. But Jefferson absolutely murdered yesterday. Murdered. You really, really can't have much better of a game than that as a receiver, because the rest of your production is a product of the quarterback. He did, when the ball was in his hands, he did something with it. And and on top of it, he's an easy guy to like because he's so much fun too. I mean, I know that everyone was, pumped when he's walking into the end zone, dancing like Deshaun Jackson, like praying he's not going to drop the ball. But, like, how exciting is this player? I mean, you get this guy for at least 3 more years, right? And he's probably going to be with the franchise because the way the NFL is shaped and kind of the way that you leave an organization. I mean, Justin Jefferson, if he continues to play very well, he's going to be a Viking forever. And that's exciting to think about based off of just, I know it's a small sample size, right? I know it's just one game. I know he's got to string a lot more of them together for it to really start to be, a true number 1 threat. But this is highly encouraging. This is everything you can ask for out of a first-round pick this early in his career. All things considered, it's even better. He didn't have preseason. This is basically game 3 of the preseason for Justin Jefferson. He's learned the playbook. He's using his skills efficiently, and he's connecting when he's asked to. How much more can you ask of this guy? He was an absolute stud yesterday.
Yeah, and the other thing, so you mentioned the Diggs, did not play at all first, I think 4 games.
I think it was 5.
His rookie year, something like that. And you look back at some of the other recent first-round receivers, Patterson, Treadwell in particular, in Treadwell's case, never, but in their cases, it took a long time for those guys to get big roles. Patterson's role was never really a wide receiver role. Right. And Treadwell, he didn't score a touchdown until 2 years into his career. And so, I mean, you could honestly say Jefferson has already surpassed Treadwell in terms of, Vikings wide receiver legacy, if you will. And so that is super encouraging in itself. And it's so funny because I don't know if you saw the snap counts, but first 2 weeks, BC Johnson was clear cut number 2 guy in terms of the number of snaps. And I believe, if I got this right, BC played 5 snaps on offense yesterday. And so something clicked in practice, I don't know. Maybe they're just you know what, screw it. Something's got to change on offense. We're going to throw to this guy a little bit more.
I think that's what it was.
Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. But this guy clearly can separate. He can make some things happen after the catch. That contested catch down the left sideline was super sweet. He's not afraid to go up and get it against other NFL cornerbacks. So that's fun. That's fun to see. And, again, I'm not going to be, it's wide receiver. A lot of it is dependent on your quarterback, the production you get, your career arc. It does depend on how you're being thrown the football. And so for his sake, I hope he can keep getting opportunities like that. But man, you're right. He's fun to watch and easy to root for. So good for him. That was fun to see. And it's just, and I liked how again, the taking blame thing, man. I love this because in the press conference, he's like, it doesn't matter how many catches or touchdowns I have. We lost and I got to do better. And it's you know what? I don't know. I don't even remember if he actually messed up yesterday. I know the interception towards him may have been a missed route or whatever it was. But he owned up to that right away. And so that's the thing that's, again, really easy to root for him.
Absolutely. And the rest of the receiving corps played well too. Thielen only 3 receptions, but he had the great touchdown in the corner of the end zone. 29 total yards. Rudolph, of course, had the amazing one-handed catch. But basically, this was the Justin Jefferson show. That's kind of why we're highlighting specifically him. Just another thing to knock Kirk Cousins while I'm at it, right? Justin Jefferson's had a great game now. Adam Thielen's had a great name now. How about 2 good games instead of one guy sticking out like a sore thumb, right? I mean, can we spread the ball around a little bit more? Because next week, that he's going to try to go to Justin Jefferson more often, and that it's probably not going to be there because it's on film from week 3. So I'm already frustrated with Kirk because I know that, he's focusing in on the one guy who's making plays. And granted, that's not necessarily a bad strategy. I'm not saying don't throw to the hot receiver. I'm saying mix the ball around a little bit. I mean, Adam Thielen wasn't playing poorly. And I'm not saying, and again, I don't know the design of these plays. I don't know necessarily who was the number one shot on every single play. This could be on Kubiak too. But like, you could spread the wealth a little bit better than they did. I mean, 175 is number one, 29 is number two. I just don't know about that. That's just, I don't get it, because like you look at Tennessee's receiving, then you got Khalif Raymond, who, by the way, who the hell is that guy? 118 yards. And then Corey Davis, 69 yards. Jonnu Smith, 61 yards. Adam Humphries, 41 yards. That's a much more efficient box score to me than one guy having 175. And yeah, that's amazing. But I'm thinking long term here. I'm thinking about what we can get from the rest of the season. And I'm just saying, long term, if you only have one guy you're throwing the ball to, or you're honing in on one dude because that's what's worked for you, I'm just saying it's not going to work long term to hone in on one dude every game.
And I'm not. I haven't watched all 22 or see. That could just be what the defense gave Kirk. I'm not gonna.
It could have been. Yeah.
It could have been. They could have been bracketing Thielen the whole time, and they were forcing somebody else to step up, and they just forced Justin Jefferson to be that guy the whole game. So maybe that was the case. I don't know, but I will say this too. Thank you to the Philadelphia Eagles for drafting Jalen Reagor, because I remember that on draft night. Of course, draft night, I remember this. Like, the Eagles were up, and then they showed Justin Jefferson on the ESPN broadcast, like celebrating with his family, and I was like, oh my god, well, that was one of the guys I wanted for Minnesota right there, and now he's going to go to Philly right before the Vikings. And no, he was celebrating actually the Vikings calling him, which was a complete 180 from what I had thought had happened. So that's cool. And Philly, of course, is paying for that at this point as well. They don't have any receivers to throw to right now. And so that's all I wanted to say for offense. Justin Jefferson's a stud. Dalvin Cook's a stud.
Very encouraging signs from everyone not named Kirk Cousins, basically. And honestly, for what it's worth, like I know I've just been absolutely shit canning Kirk Cousins this episode, but like there were bright spots to his game too, and I think I highlighted a couple of those. I mean, again, I'm frustrated, and part of this.
Well, the problem here is like, as well, so but like we'll get to the defense, but like, in past Mike Zimmer eras, this is my transition to the defensive side here that we'll probably won't spend a ton of time on, but like a 30, what did the Vikings put up? 30 points. Mm-hmm. That wins almost any game at US Bank Stadium prior to 2020 with Mike Zimmer as head coach.
They're 0-2. 0-2 this year when the Vikings offense scores 30. Before that, I think it was 24-0 or something like that. Don't fact check me on that, because I saw the stat and I'm trying to remember it. I know it was high, but they hadn't lost a game until this year when the Vikings offense scores 30. So continue.
Yeah. So that's the thing is, so there's got to be some blame, and that's a part of the reason. Like, I love Mike Zimmer. He's a very easy guy to root for. I love his attitude. I love his his demeanor and kind of get after you, but still kind of really is a player's coach at the same time type of thing. But with that said, like I didn't like how he's like, I wish Dalvin didn't fumble. And then, the whole like seems to be sort of placing blame on the offense for that final drive when your defense surrendered 30.
Your defense. It sounds like he's deflecting blame, honestly.
It's kind of what I'm getting at. And it could have been. Now, we also got to throw this in there. Stephen Gostkowski was 3 of 6 on the season before this game, and then went 6 for 6 with 350 yarders. So that's just perfect Vikings. And really, the Vikings probably outplayed Tennessee in this game. And just, the field goal luck, plus Dan Bailey missed one. So that's just classic, right? But your defense giving up that many points, that many big plays, like a lot of pass, like Raymond, getting past your corners, getting behind your defense a couple times. Outside, I saw Anthony Harris was graded really poorly by PFF. I think he had one play on a third down that he broke up. But other than that, seemingly not in the right spot. Like there's holes there still, right? I think Harrison Smith was probably their one bright spot defensively, and then maybe, of course, Ngakoue strip sack and
Kendricks was nice.
But there's holes that need to be fixed up that the Vikings don't allow this many points. They're prior to 2020 didn't allow this many points this easily, and something's changing, and it's not for the better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it starts with the secondary, right? I mean, Ngakoue, we gave him a lot of heat week one. He's certainly added to the pressure numbers since then.
Yeah.
You're getting what you bought with Ngakoue, right? He's got another strip sack, which was beautiful, by the way. He's as good in the league as you're going to find with that in that regard. So I was happy with his performance. Harrison Smith had a highlight reel interception. He's doing everything and anything he can. I know that Mike Zimmer highlighted a moment where both Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris were out of place, and that put I believe it was Holton Hill on an island. But I'm still assigning blame to these cornerbacks, man. I don't think like Holton Hill. I don't know if the reason
By the
why
way, Holton Hill should have had that pick six to ice the game at the end there.
he absolutely should have. That's just another moment where like the Vikings could have won and didn't, right? And that's just very Vikings. But like Jeff Gladney for how good Justin Jefferson was this game, it was the opposite for Gladney. He was getting raked. The dude was being used all game long, and I just listed the receivers for you. Khalif Raymond, Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith, who is
not AJ Brown.
Not AJ Brown, exactly. I mean, I'm very like I don't know what to say with these corners, and I know Hughes and Dantzler were out. I know that Chris Boyd was playing injured, but Boyd, Hill, and Gladney all looked bad, straight up, just bad. Like I don't know how much better I can say it than that. Like we could go into the schemes and stuff, but like it doesn't change the fact that they weren't covering their guys efficiently enough, and these guys we're not covering Odell Beckham Jr. here. We're not covering DeAndre Hopkins here. Hell, we're not even covering Devontae Adams. We're covering Khalif Raymond. Who the hell is that guy? And you guys can't find a way to stick him between the four of you that are out there? It's frustrating. It's hard to watch. And yes, ultimately this game, like it's not on Kirk Cousins because yes, he did generate 464 yards of offense, I believe. And the defense, you should win when you have 464 yards of offense.
They did a nice job on Derrick Henry for the most part, right? Like I mean,
so.
He didn't break off the big giant run that he sometimes does when he stiff arms 12 people. Everything was contained. It wasn't like it was out of control. He gobbled up yards based on volume, but
right.
He was
26
just
carries.
He wasn't an X factor. The X factor was Tannehill hitting play action passes deeper down the field. And now, for what it's worth, like the Vikings defense they allowed 3 for 13 on third down. That's darn good. That's elite even. I think they might be top 5 in the league right now on third down. But first and second down are so bad that it doesn't even matter. So that's the thing. Like they allow so many big plays on first and second down that get the other team in field goal range, and then they make so many field goals. How many field goals did the Colts have last week? And then Gostkowski had 6 this week. I think Packers had 2 or 3 in the week 1. So that to me, early downs, early parts of the drive, Vikings are just getting cooked right now. And that's the part that needs to be figured out, at least on my brief, quick synopsis of what is going wrong on defense. And of course, it's looking at the finer things of secondary and, having 12-year-old corners doesn't help. But I'm just quickly looking at how do you have a defense that's top 5 in the league on third down? Like how is coaching situationally that much different where on third down, your team can be elite, right? 3 of 13 against Tennessee. I'm like 90% sure at this point, and this might change with the Chiefs-Ravens game tonight, but they're number 5 in the league on third down defense, percentage-wise. How is it that good, but then they're still just horrendous across the board, like everywhere else? They're allowing, a Titans offense that's like they're not a firepower offense, right? The Colts, not a firepower offense. Packers probably are now, but he still surrendered 40 points.
Right.
It's not going to get it done at any level, in any situation.
Yeah, pretty much, unless you're Mississippi State against LSU this weekend, but then you needed 630. Yeah. So, put that into perspective. Yeah, the defense wasn't good enough, and ultimately, like I'm going to say something cliche here, but I think we all need to hear it. Like the big plays got to stop downfield, right? Like the big downfield plays, specifically on Holton Hill, that they got to stop. You're not going to win any games. And honestly, I don't really care if they win any games anymore, and that's the kind of the closing segment that I wanted to get to. But it wasn't good enough defensively. And for those of you out there like that are saying like this is on the defense, like I'm not putting this one on Kirk. Like I will give you this piece that yes, like the defense was not good enough for even an above average quarterback to win most games. But again, I don't care. I just don't care. I don't care about your opinion if that's what it is, because I still like the final drive. Like, you have an opportunity.
Yep.
And all you can ask for in the NFL, right, is the opportunity.
I just hate how bad it looked. Like, at least move the ball a little bit. Like, give your field goal kicker a chance. Like, it's one thing if he misses a 52-yarder and you lose.
Right.
They go backwards 20 yards with a horrible, the snap thing, the what ultimately ended up being a Hail Mary interception. But
the dump off to Dalvin Cook, which would have ran like 30 seconds off the clock. Like, is this Kubiak? Is this Kirk? I don't care. Like, whoever's doing it, stop doing it wrong. Like, it's wrong. It's not good. And whatever. Okay. The defense wasn't good enough. The offense, very solid. A lot of bright spots, but ultimately, when it came to crunch time, not good enough either. So,
one thing I wanted to ask you: have you seen who the number one cornerback is on Pro Football Focus?
Yeah, I just saw this actually. Xavier Rhodes is your number one cornerback on Pro Football Focus. Yeah. And the guy who is wearing 29 now, Chris Boyd, probably number 544, if there are that many corners. And if there isn't, there should be, because he's that low. He did not do well yesterday either. I mean, guys, it's just frustrating. I very much share your frustration right now. This is not fun to watch. And that leads me to kind of the final segment of the show. And that's, where do we go from here? Like, you're 0-3, right? We gave the odds last week on postseason when you're 0-2. They get worse when you're 0-3, shockingly. At what point, what do you want to do here? As a fan, I'm not asking from a coach. I'm asking from a fan. You're not trying to save your job right now. What do you want as a fan from the rest of this Vikings season? Knowing what you do, seeing what you have, what needs to happen for this to be considered, not just an entertaining season. We're still going to get football for, 14 more weeks. And that's great. That's great. I love it in itself. But for this to be a quality football season that moves the Vikings forward, what needs to happen? What's your to-do list here?
I hate this question because, the first thought that most fans have is you put in your developmental backup young quarterback instead of Kirk and see what he got.
You mean the one the Vikings don't have?
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
my
exactly
God.
my point. So that's the thing. And here's, okay. So this is going to sound super optimistic, which is for sure not my brand at all when it comes to the Vikings. You got the Texans, who don't know how to win anymore and are bad. You have Seattle, which is a loss. That's just a loss. At Seattle prime time, that's a 30-point loss. But then you get the Falcons, who also don't know how to win. Who are finding ways to lose, seemingly on purpose, the last couple weeks.
Worse than the Vikings, by the way.
Who are being accused of throwing games for trying to lose so bad. That's the Atlanta Falcons now. So you have at least 2 winnable games there. Then, and Green Bay looks dominant right now. But then you get the Green Bay game, and you get divisional games, and then you get an easier part of the schedule down there with Jacksonville and home games against Carolina and Dallas, and so the schedule gets a little bit looser moving forward in the next 8 weeks or so. You can't I see a scenario where a performance like yesterday's against some of the teams coming up could result in enough wins where the Vikings could be in the hunt category on your playoff graphic in week 11. They'll be 5-6 or 5-7, and they'll be in the hunt because they'll be technically alive, and it'll be I wonder what scenario needs to happen for the Vikings to sneak into that number 7 seed. I think that is what we could be heading towards, which is, as a lot of fans are going to say, it's purgatory because you don't get the top pick, but you don't get the playoffs. And however you want to root for it, I think that's a possibility. And to me, that's at least interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm all in on the tank. I just want to go there right now. Okay, I'm all in. I don't care if it's 3-13. I don't care if it's 0-16. I'm all in on the tank because.
So what does this look like for you? Because I know how you feel about Sean Mannion. So what does this look like for you?
Keep going with what you have, make it entertaining, and really just do what you did yesterday. Make sure it's a loss though, for the foreseeable future now.
So you're rooting for losses. Is that what? Is that?
I'm not. Okay,
Because
that's tough. That's tough.
I will never get behind that sentiment. I
That's
never will.
okay.
I
So
can never root
that's
for.
that's challenging because I'm not rooting for losses. I'm rooting for the result. I want a high draft pick, and ultimately, in order to get there, right, that means that I
Hey,
have to root for a loss, right? So no, I'm not saying I want the Vikings to lose because it makes my Sunday horrible every single time they do, and that's not going to change despite what I just said. But ultimately, like I, this is the right year to suck, right? This is the right year to do it. If you need a quarterback,
but it's not. But it's not because you just extended Kirk. You just extended Zimmer. Like that's why it's all
I
messed up. This is
like
the wrong year to suck at the same time.
yes, you're talking about the Viking situation. I'm talking about the prospect situation, right? Like if you miss out on Trevor Lawrence, like let's say you get the 2 pick, you miss out on Trevor Lawrence, you still got a shot at what Trey Lance and Justin Fields, both who look very good, right? All three of which I'd rather have than Kirk Cousins. I'll pay Kirk Cousins. I'm not going to pay Kirk Cousins. I'm okay with the Vikings paying Kirk Cousins 41 mil next year, as long as they have Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields or Trey
Somebody
Lance,
that they
whoever
can
else.
see, they can
Yes,
see and try out and experiment. Okay, see what you got, little
yeah.
young kid. Yeah,
And
I understand. I will never root for a tank. I just don't subscribe to that idea, and this even is true in uh,
but
NBA where
let me
you
ask
know
you this then. So like I think you just asked me a hard question and I had to come to terms with kind of where I'm at mentally, right? If I say the same thing to you, I'm gonna ask the reverse to you then. Like, yes, you're not rooting for a tank, but let's say they go 7-9 this year and they miss out on an
yeah.
opportunity to get a franchise quarterback. Like, aren't you just gonna feel shitty in April then instead of feeling shitty in October?
See, I'm at this point. I think you saw it with like Mahomes, right? You see it with a lot of these recent draft picks, maybe Buffalo. Um, you can trade up to that like the bottom of the top 10 if a guy falls, and one of those three guys could fall. I mean, there's still a lot of college football to be played. Trey Lance isn't going to get a season at this point. I don't think, right? Is FCS doing a season? Maybe it's in the spring. I don't know what he's going to do if he's going to play or not. So I think the draft picks that Spielman has acquired will allow him to move up in that scenario. And so I think if the Vikings end up at say 14, right, that's where they're at in the first round. I think the NFL draft process is like picking the players is volatile enough where you can still get a stud there. Aaron Donald, J.J. Watt, Von Miller. Von Miller might be higher than that, but Aaron Donald, J.J. Watt were 10 to 15 range in the first round. And so
Right.
those guys, like there is that caliber player that late in the first round. But if you're looking at a quarterback, you're right. You want to get higher. That's where you'd have to get Spielman to trade up, which he may or may not do because they already have Kirk Cousins under contract until 2022.
And obviously there's the prize here, right? Like there is the true generational prize in this draft and this draft alone, and that's Trevor Lawrence, right? Like the quarterbacks like him just don't come along that often, right? So like if the Vikings end up with the 3 pick and they don't get Lawrence, like that's still going to be somewhat disappointing, I think. So yes, I think you bring up a good kind of thought here because like you're right. Like I'm never going to root for the Vikings to lose. I'm not that type of person. I'm too competitive of a human being. Hell, if I'll just say it. Hell, I still believe they can turn it around at 0-3 if they get a couple things straight. Now, do I realistically think that's going to happen? No, probably not. But I'm going to continue to root for it because it's not like the season's dead at the end of September. Like the odds say that you're pretty well screwed, but like the Vikings have been defying
I
odds
just
forever. And granted, most of the times they defy odds, it's on the other way around. But they are capable of doing it. So
I just and part of it's almost a principle thing for me. Like I can't wrap my head around the idea that you would root for your favorite football team to lose. Like I don't, and I understand the thinking. I 100% do, and I get it. You're looking ahead, blah blah blah. But like when I'm sitting there on Sunday with my pizza and my beer, looking at the football game on TV, like I can't be like, oh, I want Green Bay to win this game.
I wish
I will
Justin
never.
Jefferson had dropped that ball.
Yeah,
Not gonna. You're never gonna hear me.
I can't do that. I can't do that, and I will never do that. But we can do whatever you want. Like I feel like we got to this point a little bit last year with the Vikings after the Bears game, and then things turned around really quickly. So hey, maybe that'll happen this week, and we'll figure that out when we talk about the Texans. who apparently are going to be signing Earl Thomas. So
Let's end on that note because I think that's a good optimistic note to. Again, I mean, like we're not necessarily trying to make these shows so like so dark and gloomy, but like this is the situation right now, right? Like I, it's just this is tough right now. It's it's tough, and I don't have an answer either, and I don't think anyone does. So, um, hopefully
it's
things
just a
improve. I
super
guess.
bad look. It's a super bad look when you're franchise. You extend your head coach, you extend your quarterback, you trade second round pick or something for
Second to fifth.
a pass
Second.
rusher. All these moves are win now.
What is Danielle
and
Hunter
then
going to come back to? That's my question. What's he going to come back to?
they should shut him down. They should. That would be the smart thing to do. Herniated disc does not sound good. Does not sound like something to play with. To be risky about in any situation, unless the Vikings do make some sort of run that none of us has seen coming. But they should shut him down, which looks even worse. Because apparently, Zimmer's like, oh, he just tweaked his neck. That doesn't look great when it turns out to be a herniated disc.
Yeah.
And you would think the team knew about this well ahead of time. I don't know.
The trade certainly suggested that they did, but again, a topic for another day. We're out of time here, so thank you as always for listening. Thank you for kind of venting with us or listening to me vent, I suppose. Hopefully, I hit on a couple of pain points that you guys can agree with, and if I didn't, hopefully this gave you some sort of closure to that game. Drew and I will be back later on this week here to talk about Houston, as he said before, and kind of what the preview of that game is going to look like. So until then, make sure to check out Daily Norseman and Climb in the Pocket. The rest of the content on those two networks. Everyone's doing a great job in that regard. Much better than the Vikings are doing in their jobs, for what it's worth. So thank you for listening. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, anywhere else you find podcasts. And if you want to watch us, we're on YouTube as well. So thanks as always for listening, and we will catch you later on this week.